Well, to debate this, I'm joined here in the studio by Egemen Bagis. He's Turkey's former Minister of EU Affairs. And with him, Elis Gjevori. He's a digital producer at TRT World and an expert in the Balkans. And completing our panel from the Albanian capital, Tirana, is Agon Maliqi. He's a civil society activist, policy analyst, and creator of the news website Spunker. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Egemen Bagis, let me start with you. People, read the headlines. Turkey went in, nabbed 6 people who were their citizens, but were in another country. Was it the right thing to do?
Of course. Turkey cooperated with the local authorities, with the full blessing of the president of the country, and the intelligence authorities, and the relevant ministry. And it was a joint mission to help countries and ally-friendly countries fight against terrorism. FETÖ is one of the deadliest terrorist organizations that has harmed the well-being of this country. They have attempted a coup where they took the lives of more than 250 people overnight on July 15th, 2 years ago. And Turkey has declared them to be enemies of the state for quite a while and expects naturally from all friendly allied countries to cooperate in the fight against terrorism.
Let me ask
Turkey has been there for Kosovo from day one. Turkey is one of the first countries to recognize the sovereignty and independence of Kosovo.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And that's part of the debate, right, where Turkey has been a huge supporter of Kosovo. And that's why there's tension now. And a lot of Turks are saying, hey, you know, you're biting the hand that feeds you in many ways, right? But let me ask you, these guys were not in the tanks on the night of July 15th, 2016. I mean, we look at their professions.
Okay. First, we don't know if they were actually in the tanks or not.
Okay.
There were some school teachers who were also were involved, but they were very instrumental in financing those who prepared the coup. They were very instrumental in helping those who were trying to escape from Turkey through using the Kosovo as a stepping stone and go into other parts of the world, other European countries or countries on the other side of the Atlantic. And these guys were against the well-being of Republic of Turkey. And the evidence presented by Turkish authorities, by Turkish Interior Ministry and Turkish intelligence were compelling enough to the Ministry of Interior Affairs and to the intelligence and to the President of Kosovo that they cooperated in this mission together. It's okay when the United States goes all the way to Pakistan and picks up bin Laden and throws him into the ocean. It's okay when Israel goes to all around the world to find former members of the Nazi party. But when Turkey is going to a neighboring country that enjoys great and fruitful relations, somehow there's reaction.
Well, there was a reaction from the Prime Minister himself, and we're going to get to that in a moment.
Well, that's a domestic issue within Kosovo. I mean, it's not my job nor your job to...
But on the books, he's the most powerful man in the country. And he says, nobody told me about this.
That's his problem with the people who were supposed to tell him. That's my problem.
Okay, we're going to get into that in a moment. Agon Maliqi, is that how you see this? Turkey has a group that it's fighting, right, which was involved in a coup d'etat attempt that killed more than 250 people. They operate in many ways like a criminal organization underground, and Turkey found enough grounds to go and nab them because they were a threat to the state. And there were authorities within Kosovo that cooperated enough for it to happen. Is that how you see it?
That's certainly, I guess, the interpretation of the Turkish government regarding sort of this Gulenist movement. The way, the perspective from Kosovo on the situation is that obviously Turkey is a staunch ally, a strong strategic partner of Kosovo from the beginning, as you mentioned, and that there's a strong interest among Kosovo's people to sort of continue this strategic alliance with Turkey. Especially in this, from a geopolitical perspective, this is a very important moment for Kosovo because we are in our final lap to sort of consolidating our statehood, which is still contested, and we are in the final stages of negotiations with Serbia, so we need the support of countries like Turkey. However, the problem is that this situation has put Kosovo in a tough spot because Kosovo, although it values the strategic partnership with Turkey, it also aspires to join the European Union, and it has a it's aspiring to build a liberal democracy. Constitutionally, it's a liberal democracy, and the problem in this particular case has been the extrajudicial nature of the process, which has raised concerns among civil society activists, journalists.
Hasn't Kosovo, sorry to interrupt you, hasn't Kosovo put itself in a tight spot? Because you have the interior minister and the spy chief, and most probably the president, Hashim Thaçi, for all indications, saying, yes, do it, and the prime minister saying, nobody told me. It's Kosovo's problem. It has nothing to do with Turkey, right?
It's Kosovo, Kosovo's authorities. The problem is that there's been a lack of transparency into who and how this was ordered. The Kosovan parliament has yesterday established a commission to investigate how this has happened. The normal way it should have happened for a country like Kosovo that is attempting to abide by rule of law is that it did not go through the extradition kind of process whereby the courts would have handled it. It went through the intelligence agency, which declared the people at hand as threats to national security, and the internal affairs minister canceled their residence permit, and then they were immediately taken over without the courts being involved in any of the process. So the concern from human rights activists, democracy activists, has been that there was no due process to give them an opportunity to defend their case. Kosovo's constitution, by the constitution, we are obliged we oblige ourselves also to adhere to the European Convention on Human Rights.
Right.
So there has been genuine grassroots concern, reflected also in the Prime Minister's position, because it is an internal power struggle. But it also reflects the attitude of public opinion in Kosovo, which, although it highly values Turkey's the strategic partner, and we do see Turkey as a strategic partner, we also have these concerns regarding the human rights dimensions.
Okay, so Elis, is that at the heart of all of this? The fact that you actually have Hashim Thaçi saying these Turkish citizens had committed crimes in Kosovo, and then you have Ramush Haradinaj, the Prime Minister, on the other hand, saying these guys were stolen. Is the real scandal the fact that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing and that there's a power struggle happening within Kosovo, rather than the fact that Turkey went in, as some Kosovo Albanians would say, extrajudicially to take these men?
You're quite right on that point, actually, and Agon just mentioned it as well, in that there is an internal power struggle inside Kosovo. Up until very recently, the head of the spy agency in Kosovo was generally appointed by members that were affiliated with Hashim Thaçi. And although in paper, the head of the intelligence agency responds to the Prime Minister, or answers to the Prime Minister, actually, generally he was considered in the pocket of the president of Kosovo. And so, yeah, there is a power struggle in Kosovo regarding this. And I think the whole situation, or it's very likely that the situation with these 6 people is actually being used for internal political purposes to try and gain access to some of these institutions by Ramush Haradinaj, the Prime Minister of Kosovo. But more broadly, actually, there is probably an internal discussion that both Kosovo and Albania need to have on people from the Gulenist organization, or FETÖ. And this is actually potentially a serious problem. In Albania, for instance, they control the Muslim community there, so the organization that's Muslim community there. They have 12 schools, they have a university, they have a hospital, they have advisors inside the military.
So you believe they're really big in Albania?
They are quite big in Albania, actually. And this, there needs to be a discussion in society. Is this organization accountable? And is it accountable to whom? And this is quite problematic because it's operating in the shadows.
Right, it brings about an interesting question. Let me ask Egemen Bagis, because you've been involved in the United States, you've been involved in Europe, translating, expressing the Turkish message. People within these countries say, I'm sorry, but these people just build schools. They have hospitals. I don't see what the problem is. You're saying these are terrorists. We just see schools and we see kids who graduate from school and everything seems fine. What's your problem?
When we realized how big of a problem this was, it was a bit late for us. we're warning them. They are infiltrating into their government system as well, through their students, through their NGOs, through their hospitals, and they act like they're good guys. But realistically, they are very, very bad guys. I've been a victim of the Gulenist attacks for years, and I know how deep they can go, how dirty they can get, and how dangerous they are. So we're warning. Even the United States, they have 150 schools in the US. 120 of them are around the military bases. So they're trying to access the US military through their kids. In Albania, they are now trying to infiltrate into the system. One wonders, why would the prime minister of a country choose to create an animosity with 80 million Turks and with one of the strongest governments in the region over these terrorists who are...
But maybe no proof was given to him. I mean, would you concede that maybe he wasn't given a strong enough argument?
Or maybe he doesn't want to analyze the evidence.
Right. But you would understand if we're saying then...
one wonders if he has other ties to them.
Okay, but it's interesting. If you're saying they're so sort of nefarious and under the surface and that's how they operate, and it's true, right? They operate in the shadows. It's difficult then to pin anything strongly to them, right? So well, maybe he's waiting for something that's
strong. Go ask
strong.
the families of the 250 people who lost their lives 2 years ago on the coup attempt. Go ask the people who have been following them and who have been analyzing their actions, who have been writing books on them. These guys have even fooled us for many, many years. They changed the information on intelligence records about some of our top brass military, some business people, some high-level politicians, and they try to create a false image by accusing people of wrongdoings, but they are the most wrongdoers themselves. These guys are involved in an international scheme.
Right. I want to ask you about what Fethullah Gulen himself said in a video. He said hijackers have hijacked people from Kosovo. In a way, when you hear that, does that sound to you as if he's already implicitly or maybe even explicitly claiming them as members?
He's directly claiming them as members. And these guys are not, well, we will see their testimonies. They're not going to probably deny that they've been a part of it because they've been involved since childhood. The Gulen is not a new organization. They've been around since 1967. Was the first time Gulen was asked to establish an association to fight against communism. Since then, he's been involved in an international effort. And since 1999, when he moved to the US, he has globalized his mission. Prior to that, most of the schools were in predominantly Turkish-speaking countries of the former Soviet Union and different cities of Turkey and the Balkans. But after that, he has opened schools in 160 countries, around 1,800 schools. And if you can imagine that they are exchanging currencies in the system and they are controlling billions of dollars through schools, through hospitals, through businesses, through NGOs. This is a huge network. If you and I wanted to open a school in 5 different countries, believe me, top intelligence agencies of the world would be after our neck to see what we were doing. These guys have even a greater network than the one of Vatican. So one wonders who's behind them and for what purpose.
Okay, let me ask you, Elis, the point that Agon made. He said in Kosovo right now, what the Prime Minister is saying in his outrage reflects what civil society is saying in terms of, okay, well, Turkey, it's fine that you have a problem with FETÖ. It's fine that you have a problem with the Gulenists, but we care about due process when it comes to people in our country, on our land. Is Agon right that this is the debate that's happening right now within Kosovo? People are going, come on, you can't just come into our country and take people and leave.
So one thing I would say in regards to civil society is in Albania, in Kosovo, sorry, in many ways is detached from the population. So we'd have to also see what the population actually thinks of this. So that's firstly the point I would say. Secondly is the civil society wasn't this outraged when Camp Bondsteel, which is one of the largest American military bases in the Balkans, was being used for extrajudicial flights from people that were being sent to Guantanamo Bay. And this was recorded by Amnesty International. And civil society, by and large, was very quiet then. And now civil society has become very alarmist. And actually this is, in Kosovo in particular, quite a few issues are mixing up, in which there is a large degree of dislike of Turkey among some members in civil society. And this is what's partly driving this.
Okay,
and so there's various things are mixing up.
That's
here.
interesting. So Agon, is some of this being driven by the fact that there is a deep dislike of Turkish society within certain sectors of Kosovo?
I would disagree with that. Of course, there might be a minority segment that might share some sort of Turkophobic sentiment, but I think there's a deep, strong tie, historic tie also between Kosovo and Albanians in general with Turkey. And even if you look at surveys, for example, the Kosovo Center for Security Studies just published a few months ago a survey on strategic partners. Around 70% of people in Kosovo will say that Turkey is friendly or very friendly. The concern is that we are a bit sensitive right now, especially as a country that's trying to establish itself in the international arena, and having to struggle, having this battle with Serbia, is on this issue of sovereignty and in a sort of our assertiveness in international affairs. So, and I think Prime Minister Haradinaj, in his statements and actions, merely was not in any way trying to provoke, I think, Turkey or with his statements. He merely asked sort of for responsibility because there was a lack of clarity in terms of how the process went. And even in reactions to President Erdogan's statements, sort of merely did not try to raise this into any kind of conflict, which I don't think either side is sort of interested in making this sort of a bilateral sort of conflict, because as I said, we are strategic partners. And I think that Kosovars are generally only trying to state that this is, to have a sovereign stance on this, to state that while we value the strategic partnership with Turkey deeply, we have a different, maybe different understanding of how the nature of the state should be. And I agree with Elis that we've in the past we might have sort of tolerated some, or as a society, some human rights abuses, and there might be a degree of hypocrisy here and there, but there is a genuine interest among in society for Kosovo to continue the European path and join the European Union.
Okay.
And by doing what the Kosovo authorities have done in this case, we've gotten a strong reaction because we're maybe the only country in Europe that has agreed to this kind of extrajudicial process.
Okay, understood.
Agon,
I'm running out of time.
Agon, negative reaction from the European Union.
Agon,
and that puts us.
Strong reaction from the European Union, and I'm sorry, I know you all want to chime in. I want to save my last question for Egemen Bagis. I apologize. Elis, not sidelining you, but Egemen Bagis, talking about the European Union, you were at the table with them for many years, negotiating. This came from EU spokeswoman Maja Kocijancic. She said the arrest and subsequent deportation of 6 Turkish nationals legally residing in Kosovo raised questions about the respect of the due process of law. The rule of law is a fundamental principle of the European Union. If you were at the table with Maja, how would you respond to her?
First of all, to respond to Agon, strategic partners do not provide safe havens to enemies of state of their partners. Second, to our friends in European Union, they are always a day late and a dollar short in understanding what's happening in Turkey. If you ask anyone in Turkey, 80 million people are united. Government, opposition, leftists, rightists, opposition, everyone is united in believing that Gulenists are responsible for most of the problems this country is going through, and especially for what happened with the coup attempt, where we lost more than 250 lives. So European Union has to understand that a candidate member and a full member of NATO is having issues, a challenge in its fight against terrorism, and Gulenists are terrorists. So instead of trying to create an empathy, trying to support a terrorist organizations, they should, for God's sake, once try to side with their allies, with the legitimate and democratically elected government of Turkey, rather than terrorists.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they have not even extradited one single PKK member, one single DHKPC member or FETÖ member to Turkey, although two of those organizations are already on the list of terrorist organizations of the European Union.
Okay,
So
strongly
they
put.
are at a great controversy with themselves.
Okay, well, we hope we can get a response from them at some point and have them on the same show with you.
Love to do
That
it.
would be wonderful. Okay, gentlemen, I'm out of time. I have to move on, but it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. I thank you all for taking the time. Agon Maliqi, Egemen Bagis, and Elis Gjevori, thanks for joining us on the
Thank you.
Newsmakers.